I came back from base a week earlier than scheduled. I wanted to surprise my parents, but I was the one who ended up in shock. To keep listening to this beautiful and special story, please like and subscribe to the channel. Write your name and the city you're watching from, so I can include a special greeting for you in an upcoming story. The house was empty, dark, silent, mail piled up by the door, expired food in the fridge, and Grandpa's photo on the family wall had fallen to the floor like a warning. No one bothered to read. That's when I got the call from the hospital. "Are you the granddaughter of Charles Hargrove? He's been alone here for days." I froze. My parents? In Bali, living it up on beaches and expensive dinners, posting selfies while the man who raised them could barely breathe, intubated, with an emergency bracelet on his wrist. I didn't cry. I didn't fight. I did what I always do. I observed. I registered. And I moved in silence. On base, that's what saves lives. In the civilian world, apparently that's what saves dignity. The house felt like a tomb, everything exactly where my parents left it before their much-needed vacation. The coffee maker still had old grounds in it. The newspaper from 2 weeks ago sat unread on the kitchen counter. But what broke something inside me was seeing Grandpa's reading glasses, still folded on his favorite chair, waiting for him to come home and finish the crossword puzzle he'd never complete. I walked through each room, taking inventory of their priorities. New designer luggage tags, still attached to suitcases. A receipt for spa treatments in Bali, stuck to the refrigerator with a magnet. And in the living room, that fallen photograph of Grandpa, the same man who worked double shifts at the factory to put my father through college. My phone buzzed with a text from Mom. "Alina, Bali is amazing. Wish you were here." Attached was a picture of her holding a tropical drink, my father grinning beside her in a Hawaiian shirt. The timestamp showed it was sent 3 hours after the hospital called them, 3 hours after they knew Grandpa was fighting for his life. I picked up his photo from the floor. His eyes, even in that old picture, held the same gentle strength I remembered from childhood. The same eyes that would light up when I told him about my day, the same voice that would whisper, "That's my girl, Alina. You're going to change the world." The voicemail from the hospital played again in my head. "He's been asking for family. We've called the emergency contacts multiple times." I looked around the empty house one more time, at the evidence of their careless abandonment, and made a decision that would change everything. Chapter 2. She arrived with words that burn. The next morning, I was at the hospital before visiting hours officially began. Military training teaches you that early arrival gives you tactical advantage. In this case, it gave me time to understand exactly what my parents had done. The nurse, Mrs. Rodriguez, recognized something in my posture, my direct questions, the way I listened without interrupting. "You're military," she said. It wasn't a question. "Army medic," I replied simply. "How long has he been alone?" Her expression softened, but her words hit like shrapnel. "5 days. We called your parents every day. They said they were dealing with a family emergency and would be back soon." A family emergency, while they sipped champagne in 5-star resorts. I walked into Grandpa's room and felt my chest tighten. Tubes everywhere, machines beeping steadily. And there he was, Charles Hargrove, 83 years old, who once carried me on his shoulders and taught me how to tie my shoelaces. His skin looked paper thin, his breathing shallow, but when he heard my footsteps his eyes fluttered open. "Alina," his voice was barely a whisper. "I'm here, Grandpa." He tried to smile, and I saw the relief wash over his face. I knew you'd come." The doctor entered, a tired-looking man in his 50s who'd clearly delivered difficult news before. "Miss Hargrove, I'm Dr. Chen. We need to discuss your grandfather's condition." We stepped into the hallway and he pulled no punches. "He's stable now, but he needs consistent care, medication schedules, oxygen monitoring, physical therapy. This isn't something that can be ignored or postponed." I looked back through the window at Grandpa, who was trying to stay awake, probably afraid I'd disappear like everyone else. What happens if he doesn't get that care? His condition will deteriorate rapidly. "Miss Hargrove, where is his immediate family?" I could have lied, could have made excuses. Instead, I said exactly what needed to be said. "They're on vacation in Bali. They've known about his condition for 5 days. Dr. Chen's professional composure cracked slightly. "I see. Doctor, what would it take to arrange home care, proper home care?" "Well, with the right setup and a trained caregiver, it's possible, but it requires someone committed to being there consistently. I'm taking him home with me." The words came out steady, final. Chen studied my face, probably looking for signs of impulsive decision-making, but all he found was the same calm determination I used when making life-or-death decisions in the field. Miss Hargrove, this is a significant responsibility. Doctor, I've kept soldiers alive in combat zones. I think I can handle keeping my grandfather comfortable in my apartment. That afternoon, as I signed discharge papers, I wasn't thinking about my parents' reaction, or the family drama that would follow. I was thinking about Grandpa's smile when I told him he was coming home with me. The first real smile I'd seen on his face since I arrived. Chapter 3. I was there, but invisible. Growing up, I was always the responsible one. While my cousins spent summers at camps, I spent them with Grandpa, learning about his time as a young soldier, listening to his stories about integrity and service. My parents were busy building their careers, climbing social ladders, accumulating the kind of wealth that let them forget where they came from. Alina's so serious, they'd say at family gatherings, as if my desire to serve my country was some kind of phase they hoped I'd outgrow. But Grandpa never saw it that way. When I told him I was enlisting, he sat quietly for a long moment, then reached into his dresser and pulled out a small American flag, the one that had been draped over his brother's coffin in Vietnam. "This is for you," he said simply. Michael would have been proud. My parents' reaction was different. "The military, Alina, we raised you better than that. You could have any career you want." What they meant was, any career that reflected well on them, any career that fit their image of success, any career that didn't remind them that Grandpa's sacrifices were what made their comfortable lives possible. The day I graduated from basic training, Grandpa was there in his old suit, tears streaming down his face as I crossed the stage. My parents came too, but they spent most of the ceremony checking their phones and whispering about how early they could leave without being rude. "We're proud of you, sweetheart," Mom said afterward, but her voice carried the same tone she used when complimenting someone's haircut when she actually thought it looked terrible. Grandpa just shook my hand, a firm soldier-to-soldier handshake, and said, "Welcome to the Brotherhood, Alina." Now, 3 years later, as I helped him into my Jeep outside the hospital, I realized something that should have been obvious all along. I was the only family member who had ever really seen him, not as an obligation or an inconvenience, but as the man who had shaped every good thing about our family's character. My apartment wasn't much, a one-bedroom in a complex near base, but it was clean, organized and quiet, perfect for recovery. I'd already moved my bedroom into the living room and set up the bedroom for Grandpa, complete with the hospital bed the medical supply company delivered that morning. "It's not fancy," I told him as I helped him settle in. He looked around slowly, taking in the framed photos of my unit, the small American flag on my dresser, the books on military history stacked neatly on the nightstand. "It's perfect, Alina. It feels like home." That evening, as I organized his medications into weekly pill containers, my phone buzzed with a text from my father. "Having the most amazing time. Extended our trip another week. Can you check on Dad?" I stared at the message for a full minute. Check on Dad, as if Grandpa was a houseplant that needed occasional watering, not a man fighting for his life while they extended their vacation. I didn't respond. Instead, I walked to Grandpa's room, where he was already asleep, breathing peacefully with the help of the oxygen concentrate. For the first time in days, he looked safe. Chapter 4. The decision that pushed me away forever. The first week passed quietly. Grandpa's strength returned gradually, small improvements that the casual observer might miss, but I was trained to notice changes in vital signs, breathing patterns, color in cheeks. He was getting better, and more importantly, he was getting better surrounded by someone who actually cared whether he lived or died. I'd taken leave to manage his care, something my commanding officer approved without question after I explained the situation. "Family first, Hargrove," he said simply, and I was reminded again why I respected military leadership more than civilian authority. My routine became methodical: morning vitals, medication schedule, light physical therapy exercises the hospital had prescribed, meals tailored to his dietary restrictions. Between care sessions, we talked, really talked, in a way we'd never had time for during brief holiday visits. He told me about my grandmother, who died when I was too young to remember her clearly. He told me about the factory job he worked for 37 years, how he'd wake up at 4 a.m. every day to ensure my father had everything he needed for school. He told me about the night my father graduated from law school, how proud he was, how he believed all his sacrifices had been worth it. And now? I asked. Grandpa was quiet for a long time. Now I think maybe I was wrong about what really mattered. That afternoon, my phone rang. Mom, calling from Bali. Alina, honey, we just heard Dad's in the hospital. We're so worried. How is he? The casual tone, the delayed concern, the complete absence of urgency. It was exactly what I expected and somehow still managed to disappoint me. He was in the hospital. Mom, he's been discharged. Oh, thank goodness. So he's back home then. We can relax and enjoy the rest of our trip. No, he's not back home. He's here with me. Silence. Then, what do you mean with you? I mean he's living in my apartment now because someone needed to take care of him. And you were too busy posting Instagram photos to answer the hospital's calls. Alina Marie Hargrove. That is completely inappropriate. We had this trip planned for months. And the doctors said Dad was stable. The doctors said he needed consistent care. They said he'd been asking for family. They said he was alone for 5 days while you sipped cocktails and ignored their phone calls. We weren't ignoring anything. We were dealing with time zones. Mom, stop. Just stop. The words came out colder than I intended, but I was tired of pretending their excuses made sense. You made a choice. You chose vacation photos over visiting hours. You chose spa treatments over spending what might have been his last days holding his hand. You chose to extend your trip instead of coming home when your father was fighting for his life. That's not fair, Alina. You don't understand the pressure we're under. The stress. You're right. I don't understand. I don't understand how two people can abandon the man who raised them. I don't understand how you can sleep at night knowing he was calling for you and you weren't there. Another long silence. When she spoke again, her voice had changed harder, more defensive. Fine. If you want to play martyr, that's your choice, but don't you dare stand there and judge us. We've given Dad a good life. A comfortable life. You gave him money, Mom. That's not the same thing. Bring him home, Alina. This has gone far enough. No. The word hung between us like a declaration of war. What did you say? I said no. He's staying with me until he's fully recovered, maybe longer. Alina, you are 25 years old. You have no idea what you're taking on. I'm 25 years old. I'm a trained medic, and I'm the only person in this family who seems to give a damn whether he lives or dies. I hung up the phone and found Grandpa standing in the doorway, leaning on his walker, having heard every word. I'm sorry you have to deal with this because of me, he said quietly. Grandpa, you're not dealing with anything because of me. I'm dealing with this because of them. That night I made myself a promise. No matter what pressure they put on me, no matter what guilt trips or threats they used, Charles Hargrove would never spend another day wondering if his family cared about him. Chapter 5. Coming back wasn't the plan, but I came back. My parents cut their Bali trip short, not out of concern for Grandpa's health, but out of fury that their daughter had overstepped boundaries and made them look bad by taking responsibility they should have handled themselves. They arrived at my apartment on a Thursday morning without calling first, probably expecting to find chaos, an overwhelmed young woman in over her head, ready to admit her mistake and hand over care to the adults. Instead, they found Grandpa sitting at my small dining table, working on a crossword puzzle, an oxygen cannula discreetly positioned, his color better than it had been in months. They found me in the kitchen, preparing his mid-morning medications with the precision I'd learned managing field hospitals. Hello, Mom. Dad. My father looked around my apartment like he was inspecting a crime scene. Alina, what the hell do you think you're doing? I'm taking care of Grandpa. Would you like some coffee? Don't you dare take that tone with me. Do you have any idea what you've put us through? The embarrassment. We had to explain to our friends why we came home early, why our daughter was playing nurse instead of letting us handle family business like responsible adults. Grandpa started to speak, but I held up a gentle hand. This conversation was between my parents and me. You're embarrassed. You abandoned an 83-year-old man in the ICU for 5 days to take vacation photos, and you're embarrassed. Mom stepped forward, her voice taking on the patronizing tone she'd perfected during my teenage years. Sweetheart, you're young. You don't understand how complicated these situations are. We have responsibilities, commitments. So do I. I have a commitment to make sure the man who raised you doesn't die alone. He wasn't going to die. Alina, you're being dramatic. Actually, he almost did die. Dr. Chen said another day or two, without proper monitoring, and he could have had a stroke or cardiac event. But you wouldn't know that because you didn't bother to speak to his doctors. Dad moved closer to Grandpa's chair, his voice softening in that manipulative way that meant he was about to play the victim. Dad, you know we love you. But this isn't appropriate. Alina's too young to handle this kind of responsibility. What if something goes wrong? What if you fall? What if there's an emergency? Grandpa looked up from his crossword puzzle, with those sharp eyes that had seen through decades of my father's excuses. Then I'll call. Same thing I'd do if I was home alone while you two were gallivanting around Indonesia. The word gallivanting hung in the air like artillery fire. We weren't gallivanting, Mom protested. We were taking a much-needed break after months of stress. From what I interrupted. What stress? Grandpa's been healthy up until this pneumonia. You haven't been caregiving. You've been living your lives exactly like you want to live them. Alina, that's enough. Dad's voice carried the authority he used in courtrooms, but I wasn't one of his junior associates. No, Dad, it's not enough. It's not nearly enough. I walked to the window, looking out at the parking lot where their BMW sat next to my Jeep. Two vehicles that represented two completely different sets of priorities. You want to know what I think? I think you're angry because I did something you should have done. I think you're embarrassed because your irresponsible daughter turned out to be more responsible than both of you combined. And I think you're here not because you're worried about Grandpa's care, but because you're worried about what people will say about parents whose military daughter had to rescue their grandfather. Mom's face flushed red. How dare you? How dare I what? Tell the truth. I turned back to face them. And for the first time in my adult life, I saw my parents clearly, not as the successful, sophisticated people they wanted everyone to see them as, but as two individuals who had spent so long climbing social ladders they'd forgotten to look down and see who they'd stepped on along the way. Here's what's going to happen, I said quietly. Grandpa is going to stay here until he's fully recovered. You're going to visit when you want to visit. Actually visit, not just stop by to ease your guilt. And you're going to stop acting like caring for family is some kind of burden that only young, naive people take on. And if we refuse, as Dad asked, then you refuse. But Grandpa stays here. They left without saying goodbye to him. Through the window, I watched them have what looked like a heated argument in their car before driving away. Grandpa finished his crossword and looked up at me with a small smile. That was quite a performance, Alina. I meant every word. I know you did. That's why I'm proud of you. Chapter 6. Everything was the same, except me. The following weeks settled into a rhythm that felt more natural than anything I'd experienced in years. Grandpa's health continued to improve, but more than that, he seemed to come alive in ways I hadn't seen since I was a child. Having someone to talk to, someone who listened, someone who cared about his stories and his thoughts. It was better medicine than anything in his pill organizer. I learned things about my family that my parents had never bothered to share. How Grandpa had worked 2 jobs when my father was in law school. How he'd mortgaged his house to help my parents buy their first home. How he'd quietly paid for my college tuition when my parents' tight budget couldn't cover it, something I'd never known because he'd made them promise not to tell me. Why? I asked. Why do all that for people who don't seem to appreciate it? Because that's what family does, he said simply. Or what I thought family did. My parents visited twice in 3 weeks. Brief awkward visits where they asked surface-level questions about his health and talked about their work stress, their social obligations, their busy lives. They never asked about his physical therapy progress or whether he was sleeping better or if he needed anything specific. But they noticed other things. They noticed that he was laughing again. They noticed that his color was better, that he was moving around more easily, that he seemed genuinely happy for the first time in months. Alina's taking good care of you, huh? Mom said during their second visit, and I heard something in her voice I hadn't expected. Something that might have been guilt. Best care I've had in years. Grandpa replied, and he wasn't talking just about medical care. After they left, I found myself changing in ways I didn't anticipate. The hypervigilance I'd developed in the military, always scanning for threats, always prepared for the worst-case scenario, began to soften into something more sustainable. This wasn't a deployment. This was life. And life, I was learning, could actually be peaceful when you built it around the right priorities. I started cooking again. Really cooking, not just heating up military rations or grabbing fast food between shifts. Grandpa had strong opinions about seasoning and was delighted to discover I could make a decent pot roast. We watched old war movies together, and he'd point out which parts were realistic and which parts were Hollywood nonsense. You remind me of your grandmother, he told me one evening as we watched The Best Years of Our Lives. She had that same quiet strength, Same way of doing what needed to be done without making a big show of it. Tell me about her. And he did. For the first time, I heard real stories about the woman I was named after, Elena Martinez, who had worked as a telephone operator during World War II, who had written letters to soldiers overseas, who had married Charles Hargrove in 1946 and built a life based on service to others rather than service to themselves. She would have loved you, he said. She would have understood why you chose the military, why you chose to take care of me instead of worrying about what other people thought. Do you think my parents would have made different choices if she'd lived longer? Grandpa was quiet for a long time. I think your parents learned to value the wrong things. I take some responsibility for that. After your grandmother died, I worked so hard to give your father opportunities I never had. I forgot to teach him that opportunities mean nothing if you don't use them to help other people. That night, I realized something that would have seemed impossible a month earlier. I was happier than I'd been since joining the military. Not because life was easier. Caring for Grandpa was demanding work. But because for the first time in years, I was doing something that felt completely right. When my phone buzzed with a text from my unit about my return date, I stared at it for a long time before responding. I had decisions to make. And those decisions were going to change everything. Chapter 7. The silence that revealed what was missing. 3 months into our new arrangement, Grandpa was strong enough to take short walks around the apartment complex. His breathing was clear. His energy levels were good. And Dr. Chen had pronounced him remarkably improved during his last checkup. But the better Grandpa got, the more distant my parents became. They stopped visiting regularly. Phone calls became text messages, which became increasingly infrequent. When I called them, conversations were brief and focused entirely on logistics. Did he need anything? Were there any medical issues? When would he be able to go back to normal living arrangements? Never. How is he feeling? What does he think about? Is he happy? The silence around what was really happening became deafening. My parents weren't just physically absent. They were emotionally checked out in a way that went beyond simple neglect. They were actively avoiding the reality of who their father was and what he meant to their family. I think they're ashamed, Grandpa said. One afternoon, we were sitting on my small balcony, watching military planes from the nearby base perform training exercises. Not of me, of themselves. What do you mean? I think seeing me here, seeing how well I'm doing with you, forces them to admit something they don't want to admit, which is that they don't actually know how to love someone without getting something in return. The observation was gentle but devastating. I thought about all the family gatherings where my parents had talked about Grandpa like he was a project they were managing, rather than a person they enjoyed spending time with. The way they discussed his health issues as inconveniences to their schedule, the way they framed their care for him as sacrifices they were making rather than privileges they'd been given. When I married your grandmother, Grandpa continued, we didn't have much money, but we had time, we had attention, we had interest in each other's thoughts and feelings. Your parents have money now, but they've forgotten how to give anything that can't be purchased. That evening, I made a phone call I'd been avoiding for weeks. I called my commanding officer to discuss my re-enlistment options. Hargrove, you're one of our best medics. We'd hate to lose you, but if family obligations are calling, we understand. What are you thinking? I explained the situation as briefly and professionally as possible. My grandfather's health, my parents' absence, my unexpected discovery that civilian caregiving felt like a natural extension of my military medical training. Sir, I'm considering transitioning to civilian healthcare, maybe nursing school, maybe emergency medicine, but I'm not ready to leave my grandfather right now. Have you discussed this with your family? My family doesn't get a vote in this decision. There was a pause. That sounds like there's more to this story. But the short version is that I'm the only family member who's actually present for him, and being present turns out to be more important than I realized. Hargrove, you've served with distinction. Whatever you decide, you have our support, but don't make permanent decisions based on temporary circumstances. Roger that, sir, but I don't think these circumstances are as temporary as they appear. After I hung up, I found Grandpa reading in his room. He looked up when I knocked on the doorframe. Alina, can I ask you something? Of course. Are you staying here because you want to take care of me, or because you're angry at your parents? The question caught me off guard with its directness. What do you mean? I mean, I don't want to be a symbol in whatever battle you're fighting with them. I want to be your grandfather, And if you're only here to prove a point, that's not fair to either of us. I sat down in the chair beside his bed, taking time to consider his words carefully. Grandpa, do you remember when I was 8 and I broke my arm falling off my bike? Of course. Do you remember who took me to the hospital? I did. Your parents were both working. And do you remember who stayed with me that night when I was scared of the cast? I stayed. I slept in the chair beside your bed. And do you remember who taught me how to write with my left hand while my right arm healed? We worked on that together every day for 2 weeks. Right, so when I'm taking care of you now, it's not because I'm angry at my parents, it's because this is what family does. This is what you taught me family does. Grandpa nodded slowly. And what about your life, your career, your future? My future is going to be built around taking care of people, whether that's soldiers in the field or patients in a hospital. I gestured around the room. Grandfathers who need someone to give a damn whether they live or die. Alina. Yes, your grandmother would be very proud of the woman you've become. That night, I made another decision that would change everything. I called my parents and left a voicemail that was short, clear, and final. Chapter 8. She thought nobody would remember. 2 weeks later, my parents made their final play for Control. They arrived on a Saturday morning with a social worker, a man in his 50s, who introduced himself as James Patterson from Adult Protective Services. The official visit that was supposed to determine whether an elderly man was being properly cared for by his inexperienced granddaughter. I was surprised by their tactic, but I wasn't unprepared. 3 months of caring for Grandpa had taught me the importance of documentation, of following proper medical protocols, of maintaining detailed records. When you're responsible for someone's life, you don't leave anything to chance. Miss Hargrove, Mr. Patterson said, I need to conduct a welfare check on Mr. Charles Hargrove. I understand there are concerns about his living situation. What kind of concerns? Concerns that he may not be receiving appropriate care from someone who lacks proper training and credentials. I led him through the apartment systematically. Grandpa's medical equipment, properly maintained and monitored, his medication schedule, organized and documented, his physical therapy routine, prescribed by the hospital and followed precisely, his meal plans, designed around his dietary restrictions and nutritional needs. Miss Hargrove, you're not a licensed healthcare provider, Mr. Patterson observed. No, but I'm a trained military medic with 3 years of experience in trauma medicine and patient care, and I'm following care instructions provided by Dr. Chen at Regional Medical Center. And Mr. Hargrove's family members, are they supportive of this arrangement? Before I could answer, my father stepped forward. We're extremely concerned. Alina is 25 years old with no experience in elderly care. Our father needs professional attention, not amateur hour from someone playing house. Mr. Patterson looked between us, clearly sensing family tension that went deeper than simple disagreement about care arrangements. Miss Hargrove, he said, turning to Grandpa, who had been sitting quietly through the entire inspection. How do you feel about your current living situation? I feel better than I have in years. Grandpa replied simply. Are you receiving adequate medical care? I'm receiving excellent medical care. Better than I got at home. Do you feel safe here? I feel safer here than I felt anywhere since my wife died. And do you want to continue living here? Grandpa looked directly at my parents when he answered. I want to live wherever people actually want me to be alive. The words landed like a precision strike. Mr. Patterson made notes, asked a few more questions, and observed Grandpa's mobility and cognitive function. After an hour, he closed his folder and addressed the room. Mr. Hargrove appears to be receiving excellent care. His health has improved significantly since being discharged from the hospital. His living situation is clean, safe, and appropriate. His caregiver is attentive and knowledgeable, unless Miss Hargrove himself requests a change in his living arrangements. I see no reason for intervention. After Mr. Patterson left, my parents lingered in the hallway outside my apartment. I could hear them talking in tense, urgent whispers before they knocked on the door again. Alina, we need to talk. We just talked. For an hour. In front of a social worker you called to have me investigated. We were concerned. You were embarrassed. There's a difference. Mom stepped closer, her voice taking on the pleading tone she used when she wanted something. Honey, this can't continue forever. You're putting your whole life on hold. What about your career? What about dating? What about having a family your own? I am taking care of my family. But what about your future? My future includes making sure that the people I love don't die alone and forgotten. Dad tried a different approach. Alina, we're not the enemy here. We love Dad. We want what's best for him. Then why did you call a social worker instead of calling Dr. Chen? Why didn't you ask me what supplies I needed? Or how you could help? Why was your first instinct to try to remove him from the place where he's thriving? Neither of them had an answer for that. You want to know what I think? I continued. I think you're terrified that people will find out how you really treated him. I think you're afraid that the man who sacrificed everything for your success is going to die surrounded by evidence that you didn't care enough to sacrifice anything for his dignity. That's not fair, Mom whispered. Neither is abandoning your father in the ICU to take vacation photos. They left without saying goodbye. Again. That evening, Grandpa and I sat on the balcony watching the sunset. He was quiet for a long time before he spoke. Alina, I need to tell you something. What's that? I changed my will last week. I looked at him in surprise. You did? I wanted to make sure that if something happens to me, you're taken care of. The house, the savings account, the life insurance. It's all going to you. Grandpa, you don't need to. Yes, I do, because you're the only one who remembers that love is something you do, not something you say. Chapter 9. A letter, a sentence. A period. 6 months after bringing Grandpa home, I received a letter that changed everything. It wasn't from my parents. It was from Doc Chen's office. A copy of a consultation report that had been sent to my parents 3 days earlier. Grandpa's latest tests showed that his recovery was not just good, it was exceptional. His lung function, his cardiovascular health, his overall well-being, all significantly better than they had been before his hospitalization. The medical opinion was clear. Charles Hargrove was thriving under his current care arrangement, but attached to the report was a handwritten note from Dr. Chen that was clearly intended for my parents' eyes only. I want to be clear that your father's improvement is directly related to the quality of care, and more importantly, the emotional support he's receiving. In 30 years of practice, I've rarely seen such dramatic improvement in a patient's overall health, based purely on changes in their living environment and family support system. They had received this letter 3 days ago. They had said nothing. That evening, as I helped Grandpa organize his evening medications, he handed me an envelope. What's this? Something I wrote for your parents. I want you to read it first. I opened the envelope and found 2 pages of handwriting in Grandpa's careful script. Dear Margaret and Robert, I am writing this letter because there are things that need to be said, and I am running out of time to say them. For the past 6 months I have lived with Alina in her apartment. In that time, I have received the best medical care, the most attentive daily support, and the most genuine love I have experienced since your mother died. Alina has put her military career on hold to ensure that I am safe, comfortable, and cared for. She has organized her entire life around my needs, not because she has to, but because she wants to. She talks to me like I'm a person whose thoughts and feelings matter. She listens to my stories like they're important. She treats my health like it's precious. I want you to understand what that means. It means that when I wake up in the middle of the night confused or frightened, there's someone there who cares whether I'm okay. It means that when I'm having a good day and want to share a memory or a joke, there's someone who's genuinely happy to hear it. It means that for the first time in years I don't feel like a burden or an obligation. I also want you to understand what this says about you. Alina learned how to love family by watching me, not by watching you. She learned that caring for people is a privilege, not a sacrifice. She learned that being present for someone means more than buying them things or checking them off a list. You are my children, and I will always love you. But love is not just a feeling, it's a series of choices. And for too long you have chosen convenience over connection, comfort over character. Alina has shown me what it means to be truly cared for. More importantly, she has shown you what love looks like when it's put into action. I hope someday you understand that taking care of me was never her responsibility. It was yours. And it was an honor, not a burden. The fact that she took on that honor when you refused it tells me everything I need to know about who she is and who you've become. With love and disappointment, your father. I looked up to find Grandpa watching me carefully. Are you going to send this? I already did. I mailed it this morning. Grandpa. Alina. I spent too many years protecting their feelings instead of protecting the truth. Someone needs to tell them that their choices have consequences. Someone needs to tell them that you can't build a relationship on guilt visits and Christmas cards. They're going to be hurt. They should be hurt. They should be devastated. Because maybe if they hurt enough, they'll finally understand what they've lost. 2 days later, my father called, not to yell, not to argue, but to ask one simple question. Alina, are you happy? The question caught me off guard. What? Are you happy? Taking care of Dad, changing your whole life, giving up your career. Are you actually happy? I thought about the question seriously. Yes, Dad. I'm happier than I've been in years. I don't understand that. I know you don't. Alina, I want to understand. I want to understand how taking care of someone sick makes you happy. I want to understand how you can give up so much and feel good about it. Dad, it's not giving up anything. It's gaining something. I'm gaining the knowledge that when Grandpa dies, and someday he will die, I'll have no regrets. I'll know that he spent his last years feeling loved and valued and important. And you think we can't give him that? I think you don't know how. There was a long silence. Alina, yes, will you teach us? Chapter 10. The Choice I Made with My Heart at Peace. 8 months after bringing Grandpa home, my parents started visiting regularly. Not the brief, awkward visits of before, but real visits. They came for dinner. They stayed to watch movies. They asked Grandpa about his stories, his opinions, his memories. It wasn't perfect. Years of emotional distance can't be healed in a few months. But it was genuine effort, and Grandpa noted, "They're trying," he told me one evening after my parents had left following a 3-hour visit that included a home-cooked meal and a long conversation about Grandpa's time working at the factory. How do you feel about that? Grateful, and sad that it took so long. I had decisions to make. My military leave was ending, and I needed to choose return to active duty or transition to civilian healthcare. Grandpa's health was stable, and my parents were finally stepping up to be present in his life. I could go back to my original plan, but I didn't want to. 6 months of taking care of Grandpa had taught me something about myself that I'd never understood before. I was meant to be a caregiver, not just in emergency situations, not just when people were dying, but in the quiet daily work of helping people live with dignity and comfort. I enrolled in nursing school. Alina, are you sure about this? Mom asked when I told them about my decision. You were such a good soldier. I'll be a good nurse too. But it's such a change. Mom, for the first time in my life I'm making a choice based on what I want to do, not what I think I should do, or what other people expect me to do. The morning I started classes, Grandpa gave me a small wrapped package. What's this for? Open it. Inside was a watch. His watch, the one he'd worn to work every day for 37 years. The inscription on the back read, "To Alina, time well spent is love in action." Grandpa, I can't take this. Yes, you can, because you understand what it means. What does it mean? It means that the most valuable thing you can give someone isn't money or gifts or promises. It's your time. It's your attention. It's showing up when showing up is hard. That afternoon, my parents came over for what had become our regular Sunday dinner. As we sat around my small dining table, Grandpa telling stories, my parents actually listening, all of us laughing together, I realized something that would have seemed impossible a year earlier. We were finally a family, not because we'd solved all our problems or erased all our resentments, but because we'd learned that love is a choice you make every day, a choice to be present, to be patient, to be genuinely interested in each other's lives. Grandpa lived for 2 more years. Good years full of dignity and connection, and the kind of simple happiness that comes from being truly seen and valued by the people who matter most. When he died, it was at home, my home, surrounded by family who had finally learned how to love him properly. His last words were spoken to my father. "I'm proud of the man you became in the end." At the funeral, person after person came up to me to say the same thing. "Your grandfather talked about you constantly. He was so proud of you. He said you saved his life." But I knew the truth. Grandpa had saved mine. He taught me that the most important battles aren't fought on foreign soil. They're fought in hospital rooms and kitchen tables, and quiet moments when someone needs you to choose love over convenience. He taught me that taking care of people isn't a sacrifice, it's a privilege. And he taught me that family isn't about blood or obligation or guilt, it's about showing up. It's about staying. It's about making the choice every single day to put love into action. 6 months after Grandpa's funeral, I graduated from nursing school. I work now in a hospice care facility, helping families navigate the same kind of crisis my family faced 3 years ago. Every day, I meet people who are learning what I learned, that the time we have with the people we love is limited and precious, and the only way to live without regret is to love without reservation. Every day, I wear Grandpa's watch and I remember that time well spent is love in action. And every day, I know that when my own time comes to need care and comfort and someone to hold my hand, I will have earned it by giving it freely when it mattered most. That's the choice I made with my heart at peace, and I've never regretted it for a single moment.